Good afternoon, everyone. I am Miranda King, and today I would like to share with you the life, accomplishments, and leadership qualities of someone who I feel was one of our nation's greatest leaders, Abraham Lincoln. Now, when I hear the name Abraham Lincoln, the first thing that always comes to mind is that he freed the slaves. And while yes, that is true, that is not all that there was to this man. Abraham Lincoln was born February the 12th, 1809, in Hardin County, Kentucky, in a one-room log cabin. Now, because of some issues that his family had with property titles, Abraham's dad had to move the family from Kentucky to Illinois when Abraham was just 8 years old. And then sadly, his mother passed away when he was 10. Abraham's dad remarried about a year later to a lady named Sarah, and it was said that Abraham and Sarah grew extremely close. So when she passed away when Abraham was just a teenager, he was extremely distraught over this. Growing up, Abraham had mostly self-knowledge and not school knowledge. In fact, if you were to add together all of the schooling that he actually had, it would only equal about a year. But he never let this stop him. He was noted as being an avid reader who retained a lifelong interest in learning. Growing up, he worked on the farm, splitting rails for fences, and he also kept a store in New Salem, Illinois. He married a lady named Mary Todd, and they had 4 sons together. Unfortunately, only one of those sons actually lived to maturity. He was a captain in the Black Hawk War. He spent 8 years in the Illinois legislature, and he became a lawyer in the state of Illinois and was a member of the House of Representatives from 1834 until 1836. Abraham Lincoln was bold. He was determined and ambitious. His law partner said this about him, that Lincoln's ambition was a little engine that knew no rest. He was able to control his emotions. When he got mad at someone, he was known to sit down and write what he liked to call a hot letter. And what this was a letter that he would write to the person that he was mad at, and he would not send it to that person, but that would help him get out those emotions. It was also said that if he ever did lose his temper with someone, he would write that person a letter and send it to them to let them know that he was not holding a grudge against them. Abraham Lincoln was very vocal about his disapproval of slavery the entire time he was in politics. It was something that he stood up against from the first time he was given the floor. He understood that the federal government's power to end slavery was limited by our Constitution. On November the 6th, 1860, he was elected the 16th President of the United States. Now, at the time, the United States were only the northern states. There were 11 southern states that left the Union and started calling themselves the Confederate States of America. They did this in order to protect the institution of slavery. Now, the northern states thought that the southern states were wrong for doing that, so they initiated a war, the Civil War. It lasted for 4 years, from 1861 until 1865. On January the 1st, 1863, Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared forever free the slaves within the Confederacy. Before the year 1865, the Constitution committed the issue of slavery to the individual states. It is said that at the time of the Emancipation Proclamation that there were 3 million slaves in Confederate territory. Right after the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect, the Battle of Gettysburg took place. It lasted for 3 days, from July the 1st through July the 3rd, 1863. It is said to have been the bloodiest battle where the most men lost their lives in the entire Civil War. The end result? A huge victory for the Union. After this battle, Lincoln gave what is known as his famous Gettysburg Address. Now, it was only 272 words long, and it only lasted 3 minutes, but it was an extremely powerful speech. He defined the war as an effort dedicated to principles of liberty and equality for all. He also declared that the men who lost their lives there were not lost in vain, but that slavery ended because of it, and that the world would be assured that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. He concluded that the Civil War had but one objective, a new birth of freedom for our nation. On November the 8th, 1864, during the war, he was re-elected president. He went on to carry out what would have been his second term as President of the United States. Although Mr. Lincoln declared the slaves free with the Emancipation Proclamation, their post-war status was unsure. So on January the 31st, 1865, Congress signed the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in the United States. This was such a huge milestone for our country. I feel that Mr. Lincoln was a person who used authentic leadership well. Two things that we have learned about authentic leadership is this. Number one, it fulfilled an expressed need for trustworthy leadership in society. And number two, authentic leaders understand their own values and they behave towards others based on these values. These are both things that we see true about our 16th president. Abraham Lincoln always stayed true to himself. Authentic leadership is about being the real you and showing that at all times. During the Civil War, our country needed someone to fight for what was right, someone who knew that all human lives had value, and we had that in Abraham Lincoln. He was quoted saying this, "Those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves." This is what he truly believed, and that authenticity actually led to his death. You see, John Wilkes Booth had actually only planned to kidnap Abraham Lincoln at first, but when he heard that Lincoln was actually promoting voting rights for blacks, that is when he decided to not kidnap him, but assassinate him instead. And I feel pretty safe in saying this, that just because John Wilkes Booth got to him first does not mean that there were not a long line of other crazies that were wanting to kill him as well. Abraham Lincoln lost his life because he chose to give a life of freedom to others. He was also an autocratic leader. He gave orders, not as a dictator, but as a confident leader who was goal-minded. He knew that our country needed a serious change, and giving too many people a vote on what that change was would have only been a mess. Lincoln led with what I like to call humble authority. He spoke, people listened, and things changed. To me, Lincoln paved the way for so many great leaders to come behind him and follow in his footsteps. I think of someone like Martin Luther King Jr. and think to myself, had it not been for a man named Abraham Lincoln, men like Dr. King may have never been known, much less able to make such a huge impact on our country. Or I think of someone like Rosa Parks. She found courage to stand up for herself. Was it strictly because of Abraham Lincoln? Maybe not, but he definitely got the ball rolling. I'm sure that Abraham Lincoln had some failures in life, and I'm even more sure that if he were standing here with us today, he would gladly and openly talk about those failures and what he would have done differently. But the only failures that I can talk about today fall on us as a society. I see a man, a white man, who was brave enough to take a stand for what he thought was right. You know, it is so crazy to me that people actually thought it was okay to enslave someone just because they were a different skin color. I mean, I understand that these things really happen. I've read history books, and I know that that happened in our country, but it is still mind-boggling to me that someone actually got to that point to do that. But then I look at America today. Do we have slaves like we see back in the 1800s? No. But you know, it wasn't that long ago that we couldn't even use the same restroom or sit beside someone on a bus because their skin color was different from ours. Lincoln's assassination happened 150 years ago. What can we as a country say about the changes that have happened over that time? Have they been good or have they been bad? And was his death and all that he fought for in vain? I think if Mr. Lincoln were standing here today, he would reiterate the same message that he gave the day that he gave his Gettysburg Address. He would tell us to remember that all men are created equal and that they all deserve a chance to live as equals. I will leave you with this quote from Abraham Lincoln. "Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power." Thank you.